Hey guys. So today I have so many different strong desires all at once, and they're kind of conflicting. Like, you know those times when you want to be very, very productive, but at the same time you want to do absolutely nothing? I I simultaneously identify with an overachiever and a potato, and it's it's a little bit difficult to kind of resolve that sort of conflict. I think what's going to happen is after I record this, I'm going to go play video games and code, and I will somehow balance that. I keep saying to myself that I'm going to balance that. We'll see. But today's been a pretty good day. Got to just hang out. I don't know if anyone watches that show Black Mirror. This is not an advertisement for that show, but I think it is particularly good. It's a really interesting show to sit there and kind of think through. I have found that I can't, like, I'm not emotionally fortuitous enough to sit through it and sit through like 3 or 4 episodes at a time. I think my max is like 2 episodes, and then after that I have to like take a break and go look at a puppy or something because it's a little dark. But definitely a good show to watch if you are interested in shows that make you think. And not necessarily the best show to watch if you don't want to be thinking about somewhat dark things. But ignoring that, I did watch the last episode of the most recent season of that today, and that was a lot of fun. Apparently, well, never mind. But I've been dealing with this kind of general urge to do absolutely nothing because I am on break from school, and so it is kind of, I guess, excusable to do nothing, but at the same time, that is just not how I like to do things, and so I've been trying to be somewhat productive while also being a potato and eating a lot of food. I eat so much food when I'm back home, and I worry that because I don't really exercise that much when I'm home, excuse me, I'm going to get much, much fatter. But, it'll prepare me for the winter. The winter is cold. Also, if anyone watches Game of Thrones, wonderful show. Would recommend. This is not a vlog about recommending shows or things, but it is something that I just enjoy doing, is recommending things that I enjoy. But I very much loved Game of Thrones. The gratuitous nudity and violence was kind of interesting, but I think it was generally appropriate. Appropriately inappropriate, right? Like, it was kind of a useful plot device in a lot of cases, I think. And, I think you could argue that to varying degrees. But I would argue that that was generally a good idea. But ignoring that, the reason that violence bothers me is that I am actually quite wholeheartedly pacifist. And it's funny because, I still make jokes and things that can sound somewhat, I think, violent, but they're not, I think when it comes down to it, when we're being serious, violence is not necessarily the answer to a lot of things. And a lot of people take that at face value and also don't think about it with much nuance. They say, well, you're weak, or you do not consider that violence can be the only answer. Sometimes you're not understanding of people who need or use violence. And this is not to say that I'm anti-military or anti-army or I guess those last two are a little redundant and in different ways, or anti-weapons or things. I particularly enjoy weapons and guns. I fired a couple of guns in my lifetime. We'll go with a lot. I've been hunting a lot in my life, and I fish a lot. But it's just one of those things where I don't think that violence is ever a good first solution to things. I recognize that sometimes it can be an effective solution, but there's a lot of nuance there, and on its own, I don't think that it is a solution so much as a reaction. Now, that sounds like a nice, pretty play on words, and I haven't backed that up with any sort of evidence, and so my claims have gone a little bit unfounded. But I think as a general sort of statement, that covers my belief system. Pacifism is something I'm more closely aligned with. However, that, along with many other things about me, and I think life in general, is not a unqualified idea or philosophy. And so I've been kind of exploring what it means to be truly pacifist, and, there's a lot of variance there. There's a lot of different meanings to that, and a lot of different ways of thinking about life and how to live rightly or correctly. And I don't know that there is an answer to that, but there is a way to do it where you feel very satisfied with yourself. And so I think that that's what I've been going for, and that's what this vlog is about, is that one of the things that I'm interested in doing is seeing how can I live my life so that I do not regret what I do. And it would be easy to phrase that as so that I do not regret anything, but I don't know. I feel like that's too extreme. I think that it fails to encompass a lot of the things that I do regret and wish that I had done better. But I think sometimes that being able to sit there and think about the things that you would have done differently or better is nice. It is a convenient ability to grow. And that sounds kind of sappy and disgustingly optimistic, but I think that generally I do approach things a little optimistically, somewhat naively to a degree, and that helps. Well, it comes with the fact that I am quite young. Um, but being aware of those things is, I think, helpful. So going on, kind of ignoring, or not ignoring that, but moving on from that, uh, one of the things that people bring up when I say, oh, I'm pacifist, or I don't particularly like violence, or appreciate that people use it as a solution to almost any problem, is that I am a martial artist. And so I do fight. I enjoy fighting. I particularly enjoy sparring, which is slightly different from fighting, but it was a big part of my life in high school and since has kind of faded a little bit. But I think a lot of the ideologies and philosophies and way of life associated with that still stick with me. A lot of the discipline and principles of honor and integrity. And I think that it doesn't really matter where you get a lot of those virtues and values. You can get them in, that's a particularly controversial statement, but I think that it is important that you have them, that you have values, that you have passions and virtue. Where it comes from, I'm not sure that it really matters too much. And I think that one of the things I will discuss on one of these vlogs is the matter and importance of intent. And I'll talk about that later. But what I want to talk about here is that a lot of personal philosophies people have, you pick up from someone else and then modify. And so pacifism, for me at least, was like that. I picked it up from someone else and then kind of changed it a little bit kind of adapted it to myself. And there's so many different ways of arguing different opinions and philosophies and what way of life is better than others. And I don't want to be clear, I don't want to have people mistakenly assume or believe that what I'm saying is everyone should just pick their own philosophy and there's a philosophy for everyone. There's a funny, well, maybe not funny, a little scary segment from a news channel, I believe it was CNN, and John Oliver points this out at one point. Another good show to watch, him, Trevor Noah, there's a couple of them, comedian newscasters in a way. They're very, very entertaining and pretty clever, I think. Although I'm definitely not nearly as clever as they are. And so one of the things he points out is that there's a newscaster, and I think it was CNN, that says something like, you should just find every study, or a study that suits what you believe, and then go with that. They're talking about scientific studies. This is in the context of, like, a study shows, and he makes fun of and ridicules that idea for, well, being absurd. And it is. I think that that idea is absolutely ridiculous, but that doesn't say necessarily that it doesn't have some reason for having come up or being true. And I think, too, that when I say that I've adapted a philosophy for myself, that is not to say that I just took something and made it work with what I already believed. I think that it is much more of a process of recognizing where you and the philosophy you're looking at or the idea you're looking at and your current beliefs are different and similar, and saying, well, why did those differences occur and were they reasonable? I think being able to think critically about what's going on in your life is a very, very important skill, and the older that I get, the more I'm realizing people don't really stop to think about what they're doing. A lot of times people sit there and just do, or they just kind of parrot what they've heard. And it's something that I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm fairly certain that I do it constantly, and I think that it's very hard to be aware of. So I've been trying, as part of just being an adult, to recognize where those sorts of things occur and how to deal with them accordingly and responsibly. And I'm not sure how good of a job I'm doing. I think that's one of those things that requires a lot of self-reflection and isn't necessarily available through the eyes of people around you. So that's kind of my thoughts for today. Sorry this video went a little bit longer than usual, but hope you have a good evening from my perspective, or whenever time you're watching this. I hope the next piece of time is very enjoyable, and I will see you next time.